An elderly man is taken from his home by his adoptive son, certain that his destination is a nursing home. But when they arrive, he's shocked by what happens. Before the story begins, comment below which city you're watching this video from. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and leave a like. Enjoy the story, everyone. Roberto Moreira watched the rain through the window of the small room he occupied in his son's house. His wrinkled fingers absent-mindedly caressed the only photograph he had managed to save from the fire. He and Sofia, smiling in front of the white-walled house in Parody. That house by the sea, overlooking the islands and the reflection of the setting sun on the calm waters, had been their home for nearly 4 decades. Now, only ashes and fleeting memories remained, memories that, like his lucidity, seemed to slip away a little more each day. The clock read 3:30 p.m. Andre would arrive at 7, Mariana at 8, and little Lucas would be picked up from his friend's house only after dinner. Roberto sighed. The apartment in São Paulo, though spacious by city standards, seemed to suffocate him with its silence during the day and its rushed, impersonal bustle at night. "Mr. Roberto, I brought you some coffee and that cheese bread you like." Teresa, the neighbor from apartment 502, was one of the few people he talked to during the day. A middle-aged woman who worked from home as a seamstress, she always found time to bring him something to eat or simply to chat. "Thank you, Teresa, you're an angel," he replied, forcing a smile as he placed the photograph on the nightstand. "You didn't have to go to the trouble." "No trouble at all," she replied, placing the tray on the small table in the corner of the room. "The smell of fresh coffee cheers up any house, doesn't it?" Roberto nodded. But the word house echoed painfully in his ears. That wasn't his home. It was just a place where he slept, where he took up space, where he consumed resources he no longer produced. The room, which used to belong to his grandson, was now filled with stacked boxes and a single bed, where he spent most of his time between reading and involuntary naps. "How's the knee today?" Teresa asked, sitting in the chair near the window, holding up. "Like the rest of me," he replied with a dry laugh, lightly massaging the aching joint. The conversation flowed smoothly between trivial topics. Teresa talked about her sewing orders, about her son who lived abroad, about the soap opera. Roberto answered in monosyllables, letting his mind wander back to Parody, to the sound of the waves gently breaking on the shore, to the smell of the sea breeze mixed with the aroma of the coffee Sofia made every morning. When Teresa said goodbye, promising to return the next day, Roberto was once again alone with his thoughts. He slowly walked to the window and watched the street below, 20 floors down. Cars, people, all with somewhere to go, something to do. Someone waiting for them. He felt a pang of envy for that sense of purpose. At night, during dinner, silence reigned, interrupted only by the sound of cutlery against porcelain and the occasional question about each person's day. Lucas, 10, was picking at his food while sneaking glances at the phone under the table. "Lucas, no phones during dinner," Mariana warned, giving her son a disapproving look. "But Mom, Pedro's sending me the answers to the math homework." "Exactly why you shouldn't look now," Andre intervened, helping himself to more rice. "Homework is done with your own head, not someone else's." Roberto watched the everyday scene with a lump in his throat. He remembered when Andre was Lucas's age, how dinners in Parody were always full of conversation and laughter. Sofia had a gift for turning meals into celebrations even on ordinary days. "And you, Dad, how was your day?" Andre asked, interrupting his thoughts. "Normal. I read a bit, talk to Teresa, that neighbor is always here, isn't she?" Mariana commented, in a tone Roberto couldn't quite decipher. "She's very helpful. She's kind," Roberto replied, feeling a flash of irritation. "And she keeps me company when you're not around." The uncomfortable silence that followed was broken by Lucas. "Grandpa, are you going to help me with my project on marine animals? Remember you said you knew everything about the fish in Parody?" Roberto's heart warmed. "Of course, my beau. We'll start tomorrow." Later, alone in his room, Roberto sat on the edge of the bed and opened the drawer of the nightstand. From it, he took a repeatedly folded envelope. Inside, a brochure for Recanto São Francisco, a nursing home for the elderly located in the countryside of São Paulo. He had gotten the brochure during one of his rare solo outings, when Andre left him at the mall while handling bank errands. The brochure promised comfort and dignity in old age, with photos of smiling elderly people playing dominoes or doing crafts. Roberto knew the reality probably wasn't as charming as the photos suggested, but anywhere would be better than feeling like an intruder in his own family's life. He put the brochure away and walked to the window. The city lights formed an endless carpet stretching as far as the eye could see, so different from the starry sky in Parody, where each constellation seen within reach. The fire hadn't just destroyed his house. It had stolen his sense of belonging, his independence, his dignity. The decision was made. The next day, he would speak to Andre about the nursing home. He would suggest selling the land where their old house in Parody once stood. The money would be enough to cover his stay at Recanto São Francisco for many years, without financially depending on his son. It was the most sensible path, the solution to all the problems. That night, Roberto dreamed of Sofia. They were both sitting on the porch of their house in Parody, watching the calm sea reflect the first stars of the night. She smiled in that unique way, with eyes that sparkled as if they held all the secrets of the universe. "Don't give up on our home, Roberto," she said in the dream, holding his wrinkled hands in hers. "Don't give up on living." He woke up with a tear-streaked face and a tightness in his chest. He looked at the clock. 5:17 a.m. The apartment was still wrapped in silence. He sat on the bed and tried to organize his thoughts. Sofia's voice in the dream felt so real, so present. But reality was something else. The house no longer existed. Sofia no longer existed. And he himself was just a shadow of the man he once was. That morning, when the first rays of sunlight began to illuminate São Paulo, Roberto was already up, mentally rehearsing the words he would say to his son. It was time to accept the inevitable and take the next step, a step toward the end of the journey, one he hoped would bring relief to everyone. What Roberto didn't know was the fate, or perhaps the love, of his family was about to take an entirely unexpected turn, transforming not only his circumstances but also his spirit, worn down by the weight of guilt and loneliness. The opportunity arose during Saturday breakfast. Unlike weekdays, when everyone rushed out, weekends allowed for a bit more time together, even if attention was often split between the table and the screens of their phones. Roberto had spent much of the night awake, mentally rehearsing how he would approach the subject. His hands trembled slightly as he spread jam on his toast, more from nervousness than from the effects of age. "Son," he began hesitantly, waiting for Andre to lift his eyes from the digital newspaper he was reading on the tablet. "We need to talk about something important." Andre looked up, adjusting his reading glasses. "Sure, Dad, is something wrong?" Mariana, who was preparing more coffee in the kitchen, stopped what she was doing, as if sensing the seriousness of the conversation that was about to happen. Lucas had left earlier for swimming class, which made the moment perfect for that discussion. "I've been thinking a lot about my situation here." He chose his words carefully. "You've both been wonderful to me, but I know it's not easy having an old man around taking up space, demanding attention." "Don't say that," Andre began, but Roberto raised his hand, asking to continue. "Let me finish, son. I found a place. It's called Recanto São Francisco. It's a nursing home, but it's well recommended." He pulled the folded pamphlet from his shirt pocket and laid it on the table. "I thought maybe we could sell the land in Parody. The beachfront property must still be worth quite a bit, even with the house destroyed. The money would cover my stay there for many years." A heavy silence fell over the kitchen. Mariana approached, holding the coffee pot but not pouring anything, as if frozen upon hearing those words. Andre picked up the pamphlet, examining it with an unreadable expression. His eyes quickly scanned the photos, the prices, the description of the facilities. "Dad, is this really what you want?" he finally asked, his voice low and controlled. Roberto felt a tightness in his chest. Want? No, it wasn't what he wanted. What he wanted was to go back to his house in Parody, to smell the sea mixed with the scent of the garden flowers Sofia used to lovingly care for. He wanted to wake up to birdsong, not the incessant noise of traffic. He wanted his independence back, his routine, his space, but all of that was impossible now. "It's what's best for all of us," he replied, averting his gaze. "I know you have your lives, your commitments. And I've already caused too many problems. If this is because of the fire, Dad, we've already talked about it. It was an accident. It could have happened to anyone." Andre tried to argue, but the guilt gnawing at Roberto couldn't be soothed by consoling words. An accident that I caused out of carelessness, Roberto insisted, his voice trembling with contained emotion. I fell asleep with a candle lit. What kind of person does that? Lost not only our home, but everything Sophia and I built over a lifetime. The photographs, the souvenirs from our travels, the letters we exchanged when we were young, everything turned to ashes because of me. Mariana finally placed the coffee pot on the table and sat beside her husband. Roberto, you're being too hard on yourself, she said gently. We all understand how much you've lost. But sending you to a nursing home isn't the solution. It's not sending, Roberto corrected. Trying to maintain his dignity, it's my decision. I've been independent all my life. I don't want to end my days being a burden to you. Andre folded the pamphlet slowly, as if buying time to organize his thoughts. Let's do this, Dad, he finally said. I'm not going to say yes or no right now. Let's think calmly about it. The land in Parity is something we need to discuss. It has sentimental value, beyond the monetary one, and well, there are other possibilities we can consider. Roberto nodded, resigned. He hadn't expected an immediate answer, but at least he had planted the seed. With time, Andre and Mariana would realize it was the most sensible solution. The days that followed were strange. Roberto noticed glances, whispers, conversations would stop when he entered the room. In other circumstances, he might have suspected they were plotting something against him. But he knew his son too well to think that. Andre was far too honest for that. It was the result of the upbringing he and Sophia had provided. On a rainy Tuesday, Andre arrived home earlier than usual, carrying a folder full of documents. Dad, we need to take care of that land issue in Parity, he announced, spreading some papers on the living room table. I need your signature in a few places. Roberto felt his heart race. Had Andre accepted his proposal? Was he really considering selling it? Of course, son, he replied, adjusting his glasses to examine the documents. What exactly are these? Just formalities to get the process started, Andre explained vaguely. Authorization to represent you. Land appraisal, those sorts of things. Roberto looked at the papers, full of legal terms he barely understood. The small font strained his tired eyes. He trusted his son, but a protective instinct kicked in. Are you sure this is the right thing to do, Andre? That land ... double quotes his voice. Falter, that land was where I lived the best years of my life with your mother. Andre placed a hand on his father's shoulder. Trust me, Dad, I'm doing what's best for you, I promise. Roberto signed the documents one by one in the places Andre pointed out. Each signature felt like sealing not just the land's fate but his own. The image of the White House in Parity, with its blue windows facing the sea, faded from his memories. I could dream at dawn. How long do you think it will take? He asked, handing back the pen. A few weeks, maybe, Andre replied, carefully storing the papers in the folder. There are procedures. You know how bureaucracy in Brazil is. That night, Roberto had trouble sleeping. He thought of Sophia, how she would react to the sale of the land they had loved so much. He remembered how she used to grow orchids in the garden, how they'd spend hours on the porch watching fishing boats return at dusk. Forgive me, Sophia, he murmured to the dark ceiling. I don't have the strength to start over anymore. The weeks that followed brought a subtle change. In Andre and Mariana's behavior, they seemed happier, more animated, as if sharing a happy secret. Lucas, too, was oddly excited, always whispering to his parents, and he thought his grandfather wasn't paying attention. Roberto interpreted it as relief. They were probably glad to have resolved the matter of the old man as he imagined they referred to him when he wasn't around. The thought saddened him, but it also confirmed his decision had been the right one. On a Saturday morning, nearly a month after signing the documents, Andre entered Roberto's room earlier than usual. Dad, pack a bag, we're going on a trip. Roberto felt his stomach sink. So that was it. The moment had come sooner than he expected. To Recanto Snow Francisco, he asked, trying to keep his voice steady. Andre hesitated for a moment, then nodded vaguely. Let's just say it's a surprise. Trust me. Okay, Roberto obeyed in silence. He opened the small wardrobe where he kept his few clothes and began selecting what he would take. He didn't have much, a few shirts, 2 pairs of pants, underwear, socks, a pair of shoes, and the clothes he was wearing, a whole life reduced to a medium-sized suitcase. The photograph with Sofia was carefully placed between the folded shirts to protect it. It was his most precious possession now, the only tangible evidence that he had once been happy, that he had once mattered to someone. When he finished packing, he found the family gathered in the living room. Lucas seemed especially excited, almost unable to contain himself. Mariana was smiling in a strange way, as if she were about to cry out from happiness. "I'm ready," announced Roberto, with the dignity of someone facing his fate with his head held high. "Great!" exclaimed Andre, picking up the suitcase. "The car is already downstairs." On the way to the elevator, Roberto ran into Teresa, who was coming with a tray covered by a dish towel. "Oh, are you leaving?" she asked, looking genuinely surprised. "I brought fresh cornmeal cake, thank you, Teresa." Roberto smiled sadly. "But yes, I'm leaving." "Leaving?" she repeated, confused. "Mr. Roberto is going on a trip with us," Mariana quickly explained, "but he'll be back soon to try your delicious cakes." Teresa nodded, still seeming confused, but asked no further questions. She hugged Roberto. "God be with you, Mr. Roberto, I'll be waiting for you to return." Roberto only smiled, without correcting Mariana's misleading information. What would be the point? It was easier that way. No dramatic goodbyes, no awkward explanations. In the car, he sat in the back seat beside Lucas, who could hardly sit still. The boy looked out the window every few minutes as if he were counting the kilometers. As they left São Paulo, Roberto watched the landscape gradually change. Tall buildings gave way to houses, then to more rural areas with denser vegetation. It wasn't the route toward the interior of São Paulo, where Recanto São Francisco was located. They were heading toward the coast. "Andre, I think you're going the wrong way," he commented, leaning forward. "The nursing home is in the opposite direction." Andre exchanged a complicit glance with Mariana in the rearview mirror. "Who said we're going to a nursing home, Dad?" Andre's response left Roberto perplexed. If they weren't going to the nursing home, where were they heading? He paid more attention to the road signs. Passing by the window, the highway they were on led to the coast, there was no doubt. "I don't understand, son," said Roberto after a few minutes of confused silence. "Where are we going, then?" "It's a surprise, Grandpa," exclaimed Lucas, barely able to contain the excitement in his childish voice. "Daddy said we can't tell until we get there." Mariana partially turned in the front seat, giving Roberto a gentle smile. "Just relax and enjoy the trip, Roberto. It's been a long time since you left São Paulo, hasn't it?" Roberto nodded slowly. Indeed, since the fire and the brief hospitalization that followed, he hadn't left the capital. The idea of a trip to the coast stirred mixed feelings. On one hand, the anxiety of the unknown. On the other, a strange and unexpected excitement, like a boy about to unwrap a present. The landscape continued to change dramatically. The concrete buildings of São Paulo were now completely behind them, replaced by increasingly lush vegetation. The Serra do Mar rose imposingly, covered by the Atlantic forest in all its green-toned glory. The air entering through the car's cracked windows grew increasingly humid, filled with the scent of wildflowers and wet earth. Lucas had turned on his tablet and was watching a cartoon with headphones, allowing Roberto to get lost in his own thoughts. Watching the winding curves of the road, he began to feel a familiar tingle. He knew that road well. For years, they had taken that very route during holidays and vacations when they left São Paulo toward Parody. Roberto's heart raced. Could Andre be taking him back to the city where he had lived with Sofia? What would be the point? To see the empty lot, the ruins of the house that had once been his refuge. The idea was too painful to consider. "Andreaq ... he called, his voice betraying his concern. "Are we going to Parody?" Through the rearview mirror, he caught Andre's gaze, who smiled enigmatically. "Maybe we are, Dad. You know I've always liked driving along the Rio Santos. The view is breathtaking." Roberto leaned back in his seat, trying to calm his racing heart. Yes, the view was spectacular. The road snaked along the hillside, offering glimpses of the blue-green ocean stretching to the horizon. In other times, that sight would have filled him with joy. Now, it brought only a mix of nostalgia and apprehension. The journey continued for almost 4 hours, including a stop for lunch at a roadside restaurant. Roberto noticed that Andre and Mariana seemed increasingly anxious as they approached the destination. They exchanged significant glances and text messages, as if coordinating something important. Finally, they turned onto the road that led directly to Parody. Roberto's heart was pounding so loudly he feared the others could hear it. The palm trees swayed gently in the sea breeze, and the smell of salt water filled the car, bringing with it a flood of memories. "Grandpa, look over there, the ocean!" exclaimed Lucas, pointing excitedly at a glimpse of blue water between the trees. Roberto smiled faintly. His grandson's enthusiasm was contagious, but he couldn't shake the weight he felt in his chest. Every kilometer they traveled brought him closer not only to Parody, but to a past he had tried to bury with the ashes of his old life. As they entered the historic town, Roberto was overwhelmed by conflicting emotions. Parody looked exactly the same, with its uneven stone streets, colorful colonial houses, and the Matriz church dominating the central square. Time seemed to flow differently there, as if preserved in the folds of Brazilian history. "Let's get some ice cream," Mariana suggested, as André slowly maneuvered through the narrow streets of the historic center. Lucas agreed enthusiastically. "That coconut won me at last time." André shook his head. "We need to get there soon." With growing suspicion, Roberto wondered what this commitment was. Why so much mystery? The feeling that something important was about to happen grew stronger with each passing moment. They left the historic center and followed a secondary road that led to more secluded beaches. Roberto immediately recognized the path. It was the route that led to his former property. The anxiety turned into a palpable knot in his throat. "André, please, tell me what's going on," he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "Why are we going there?" André met his father's eyes through the rearview mirror, and Roberto saw something in them he couldn't fully decipher, a mix of anticipation, nervousness, and joy. "Trust me, Dad, just a few more minutes and you'll understand everything." The road grew narrower, flanked by lush vegetation. Banana trees, palm trees, and fruit trees formed a green corridor through which the car slowly advanced. The sound of waves crashing on the beach became more audible, and the sunlight, already descending toward the west, filtered in golden through the leaves. They reached a familiar fork in the road. To the left, the path led to a small fishing village. To the right, the property that had once belonged to Roberto and Sofia. André turned right without hesitation, heightening Roberto's anxiety. "Son, I don't think this is a good idea," he began, but his voice was silenced by the vision that suddenly unfolded before them. At the end of the dirt road, where he expected to find only an empty lot or, at best, charred ruins, stood a house. Not just any house, but an almost perfect replica of the one he had lost in the fire. White walls and navy blue doors, a terracotta-tiled roof, a veranda that wrapped around the front facing the sea, and the flowering vines that Sofia had loved so much grew along the veranda's columns. The car came to a stop, and a profound silence filled the interior. Roberto couldn't speak, could barely breathe. His eyes, clouded by forming tears, couldn't believe what they were seeing. "Surprise!" exclaimed Lucas, breaking the silence and jumping out of the car as soon as André turned off the engine. Roberto remained still, as if fearing that any movement might dispel the vision, revealing it to be nothing more than another cruel dream. André got out of the car and opened the door for his father. "Come on, Dad, don't you want to take a closer look?" André invited, extending his hand to help his father out. With trembling legs, Roberto stepped out of the car. The scent of the sea mixed with the fragrance of garden flowers, creating an olfactory symphony that instantly transported him to the past. The sound of the waves gently crashing on the beach just below was like a welcome song. How is this possible?" he finally managed to stammer, walking slowly toward the house, supported by his son's arm. André smiled with tears in his eyes. "Those papers you signed weren't to sell the land, Dad, they were authorizations for reconstruction. I never intended to send you to a nursing home." Mariana approached, holding Lucas by the hand. "We started the project shortly after the fire. We wanted it to be a surprise, but the money." "How did you?" "The community helped a lot," André explained. "When they heard what we wanted to do, the neighbors, the fishermen, everyone pitched in. Some worked for free on weekends, others got us discounted materials." Roberto looked incredulously at the house, then at his son, then back at the house again. The emotion was so overwhelming that he could barely form coherent words. "Come on, Grandpa," Lucas said, pulling him by the hand. "I want to show you something." Letting himself be guided by his grandson, Roberto climbed the 3 steps leading to the veranda. The wood creaked beneath his feet exactly as he remembered. The rocking chairs identical to the ones he'd had before were strategically placed facing the sea. Even the small table for the coffee pot and liquor glasses had been reproduced. The front door was ajar. Lucas pushed it open completely, revealing the interior of the house. Roberto took a hesitant step inside and stopped, startled by the perfection of the reconstruction. The living room with its dark wooden floor, the walls slightly yellowed with age, the rustic but cozy furniture, everything was there, as if the fire had never happened. "How did you manage to recreate everything so precisely?" he asked, running a trembling hand over the back of a wicker armchair that looked exactly like the one he used to sit in on rainy afternoons. "To raid, we had the Christmas photos," Mariana explained. Andre remembered a lot of the details. He's always had a good visual memory. Besides, Andre added, some things were saved from the fire. The firefighters managed to rescue a few pieces of furniture and objects from the part of the house that was less affected by the flames. Roberto slowly walked through the living room, touching each object as if to confirm it was real. The paintings on the walls, the curtains dancing in the sea breeze, the handcrafted rug in the center of the room. It was as if time had turned back, offering him a second chance. With a heart overflowing with emotion, Roberto followed the hallway leading to the bedrooms. The familiarity of the space enveloped him like a warm embrace. The floorboards creaked in the same spots they always had, as if they recognized his steps after all that time. "Come see your room, Dad," Andre called, guiding him down the hallway. The door to the master bedroom was closed. Roberto hesitated for a moment before turning the doorknob. It was the room he had shared with Sofia for nearly 4 decades. Entering it without her felt, in some way, like invading a sacred space. With a deep sigh, he opened the door. The double bed with its carved wooden headboard, the old wardrobe with a full-length mirror, the vanity where Sofia would apply her creams every night before bed, everything was exactly as he remembered. Even the light blue curtains she had sewn by hand were there, gently swaying with the breeze coming through the open window. "How did you?" Roberto couldn't finish the question, his voice choked with emotion. "It was a labor of love, Dad," Andre replied, placing a hand on his father's shoulder. "We wanted you to truly feel at home." Roberto walked over to the window. The view was exactly the same. The garden behind the house, followed by a small grassy slope that led to the beach. The sea stretched as far as the eye could see, the afternoon sun turning the waters into a golden, shimmering blanket. "There's one more thing we want to show you," said Andre, pointing to a wooden box on the bed. Roberto approached. The box looked familiar, but he couldn't quite place it. Andre gestured for him to open it. Inside, carefully organized, was a photo album. "We found this in the part of the house that wasn't as badly damaged by the fire," Andre explained. "The firefighters rescued it from the office. It was in the wall safe, remember?" Roberto picked up the album with trembling hands. Yes, he remembered the safe. Sofia had insisted on having it installed not to store jewelry or money, but to protect what she considered their real treasures, important documents, some old letters, and the family's main photo album. Opening the album, the first image he saw was from the day of his wedding to Sofia, her young and radiant in a simple, but elegant dress. Him, trying to appear serious despite the overwhelming joy beside them. Andre, then only 8 years old, smiled shyly at the camera. "My God," murmured Roberto, running his fingers over the slightly smudged surface of the photograph. "I thought I had lost all of her photos." "There's more," said Mariana, pointing to another smaller box on the vanity. Roberto carefully placed the album on the bed and went to the vanity. Inside the second box, he found something that nearly made his heart stop. Sofia's diary. The small red notebook, with golden flowers printed on the cover, had been his gift to her on their first wedding anniversary. "Where did you find this?" he asked, his voice barely more than a whisper. "It was in a metal box at the back of the wardrobe," Andre explained. The box protected the contents from the fire. Roberto opened the diary with reverent care. Sofia's elegant handwriting filled page after page. He didn't have the courage to read it at that moment. It would be too intimate an experience, something for when he was alone. but the mere fact of having that piece of her back was like a balm for his wounded soul. "Thank you," he finally managed to say, hugging his son tightly. "I don't know how to thank you for all this. It's the least we could do," Andre replied, visibly moved. "You and Mom gave me everything, a family, love, values. You chose me when I most needed to be chosen by someone." Roberto remembered that day nearly 4 decades ago, when he and Sofia, newlyweds, had gone to the orphanage. Unable to have biological children, they had decided to adopt. Andre, with his big, sad eyes, was sitting alone in a corner of the yard, watching the other boys play. Something about that quiet boy had deeply touched both Roberto and Sofia. It was an instant connection, as if they had recognized each other as family the moment their eyes met. "You were always our son, Andre," Roberto said, his voice choked with emotion. "The moment we saw you, we knew you were the missing piece of our family." Tears welled up in his eyes. "Roberto must be exhausted after the trip and all these emotions," Mariana said. "Let's prepare something to eat." Roberto nodded, grateful for his daughter-in-law's sensitivity. He needed a moment alone to absorb everything that was happening, to allow the reality of that second chance to fully sink into his being. When everyone had left, Roberto sat on the edge of the bed. The room was infused with Sofia's essence. Perhaps it was just his imagination, fueled by the newly awakened memories. He placed the diary on his lap and gently stroked the cover, as if he were touching her face. "Ah, Sofia," he murmured to the empty room. "You won't believe what our son has done." The breeze entering through the window seemed to intensify for a moment, shaking the curtains with more vigor. A pleasant shiver ran down Roberto's spine. It was almost as if she were there, listening to him. Motivated by a sudden impulse, he got up and walked to the wardrobe. He hesitated for a moment before opening the doors. There they were, carefully hung, some clothes that could very well have belonged to their original wardrobe, alongside pieces that seemed new but were in the exact style she used to wear. On the side that had always belonged to Sofia, some of her favorite clothes were preserved like relics of a precious time. Roberto touched the fabric of a floral dress she used to wear on summer Sundays. Her perfume seemed to have clung to the fabric, lavender with a hint of vanilla. A distant sound caught his attention. It came from outside the house, a kind of neigh that awakened a dormant memory. He approached the window and looked toward the small stable at the edge of the garden. There was movement there. Someone was caring for. "It can't be," he whispered, feeling his heart race. He left the room in a rush, crossed the living room where Andre and Mariano were unpacking. "Dad, where are you going in such a hurry?" Andre asked, surprised by his father's sudden burst of energy. Roberto didn't answer. He descended the back porch steps and walked as fast as his elderly legs would allow, heading toward the stable. As he got closer, the sound became clearer. It was definitely a horse's neigh. He stopped at the stable entrance, almost breathless from the quick walk and the expectation that made his heart beat unevenly. An old, thin man, weathered by the sun, was brushing a light brown horse inside the stall. "Palomo," Roberto's voice came out trembling, almost inaudible. The horse turned his head toward the familiar voice, ears perked. For a moment, human and equine eyes met in mutual recognition. Then, as if no time had passed, Palomo neighed softly, a sound Roberto interpreted as a greeting. The old man turned, revealing a wrinkled, sun-darkened face marked by years of outdoor labor. "So juvenile," exclaimed Roberto, recognizing the old neighbor who lived on a nearby property. "Well, look who's back." The man smiled, approaching with open arms. "Took you long enough. I thought this stubborn old guy was going to end up forgetting his owner." The two men embraced warmly, a decades-old friendship, easily rekindled, as if time were just an insignificant detail. "But how did Palomo survive the fire?" Roberto asked, approaching the horse, who was now stretching his neck over the stall divider, seeking contact. "He escaped during the chaos," Juvenal explained. "I found him on my property the next day, scared and with a few singed patches in his coat, but nothing serious. Since then, I've taken care of him, waiting for the day you'd come back." Roberto stroked Palomo's muzzle, feeling the familiar texture under his fingers. The horse had been his companion for over 15 years, a gift Sofia had insisted on giving him when he retired from the accounting firm in Santos. "You knew I'd come back?" he asked Juvenal, eyes still fixed on the animal. Your Andre told me about the plans a few months ago. Asked for secrecy, of course. Wanted to surprise you. Roberto shook his head, still amazed at the extent of the plan orchestrated by his son. And you helped rebuild the house. Everyone helped a little. Folks around here like you and Donna Sofia a lot. God rest her soul. When your Andre told us what he wanted to do, no one hesitated. The idea that so many people had come together to help rebuild his home, to give back a bit of what he had lost, deeply touched Roberto's heart. During his time in São Paulo, he had felt so alone, so out of place, that he had forgotten what it was like to be part of a community. Your house looks beautiful, doesn't it? Commented Juvenal with pride evident in his voice, just like the original. My Zulite helped pick out the curtains and the bedspreads. She said she remembered exactly what Donna Sofia liked. Does Donna Zulite still make that cassava cake? Roberto asked with a nostalgic smile. She does. Better than ever. She's dying to see you. She said she's coming tomorrow to bring a fresh one to welcome you back. The mention of the cassava cake brought to Roberto's mind those Sunday afternoons after lunch, when neighbors gathered on their porch for coffee and conversations that stretched until sunset. It was a tradition Sofia loved to keep, always with a table full of homemade treats and a heart open to welcome friends. Andre, then only 8 years old, smiled shyly at the camera. My God, murmured Roberto, running his fingers over the slightly smudged surface of the photograph. I thought I had lost all of her photos. There's more, said Mariana, pointing to another smaller box on the vanity. Roberto carefully placed the album on the bed and went to the vanity. Inside the second box, he found something that nearly made his heart stop. Sofia's diary. The small red notebook, with golden flowers printed on the cover, had been his gift to her on their first wedding anniversary. Where did you find this? He asked, his voice barely more than a whisper. It was in a metal box at the back of the wardrobe, Andre explained. The box protected the contents from the fire. Roberto opened the diary with reverent care. Sofia's elegant handwriting filled page after page. He didn't have the courage to read it at that moment. It would be too intimate an experience, something for when he was alone. But the mere fact of having that piece of her back was like a balm for his wounded soul. Thank you, he finally managed to say, hugging his son tightly. I don't know how to thank you for all this. It's the least we could do, Andre replied, visibly moved. You and Mom gave me everything, a family, love, values. You chose me when I most needed to be chosen by someone. Roberto remembered that day nearly 4 decades ago, when he and Sofia, newlyweds, had gone to the orphanage. Unable to have biological children, they had decided to adopt. Andre, with his big, sad eyes, was sitting alone in a corner of the yard, watching the other boys play. Something about that quiet boy had deeply touched both Roberto and Sofia. It was an instant connection, as if they had recognized each other as family the moment their eyes met. You were always our son, Andre, Roberto said, his voice choked with emotion. The moment we saw you, we knew you were the missing piece of our family. Tears welled up in his eyes. Roberto must be exhausted after the trip and all these emotions, Mariana said. Let's prepare something to eat. Roberto nodded, grateful for his daughter-in-law's sensitivity. He needed a moment alone to absorb everything that was happening, to allow the reality of that second chance to fully sink into his being. When everyone had left, Roberto sat on the edge of the bed. The room was infused with Sofia's essence. Perhaps it was just his imagination, fueled by the newly awakened memories. He placed the diary on his lap and gently stroked the cover, as if he were touching her face. Ah, Sofia, he murmured to the empty room. You won't believe what our son has done. The breeze entering through the window seemed to intensify for a moment, shaking the curtains with more vigor. A pleasant shiver ran down Roberto's spine. It was almost as if she were there, listening to him. Motivated by a sudden impulse, he got up and walked to the wardrobe. He hesitated for a moment before opening the doors. There they were, carefully hung, some clothes that could very well have belonged to their original wardrobe, alongside pieces that seemed new but were in the exact style she used to wear. On the side that had always belonged to Sofia, some of her favorite clothes were preserved like relics of a precious time. Roberto touched the fabric of a floral dress she used to wear on summer Sundays. Her perfume seemed to have clung to the fabric, lavender with a hint of vanilla. A distant sound caught his attention. It came from outside the house, a kind of neigh that awakened a dormant memory. He approached the window and looked toward the small stable at the edge of the garden. There was movement there. Someone was caring for. "It can't be," he whispered, feeling his heart race. He left the room in a rush, crossed the living room where Andre and Mariano were unpacking. "Dad, where are you going in such a hurry?" Andre asked, surprised by his father's sudden burst of energy. Roberto didn't answer. He descended the back porch steps and walked as fast as his elderly legs would allow, heading toward the stable. As he got closer, the sound became clearer. It was definitely a horse's neigh. He stopped at the stable entrance, almost breathless from the quick walk and the expectation that made his heart beat unevenly. An old, thin man, weathered by the sun, was brushing a light brown horse inside the stall. "Palomo," Roberto's voice came out trembling, almost inaudible. The horse turned his head toward the familiar voice, ears perked. For a moment, human and equine eyes met in mutual recognition. Then, as if no time had passed, Palomo neighed softly, a sound Roberto interpreted as a greeting. The old man turned, revealing a wrinkled, sun-darkened face marked by years of outdoor labor. "So juvenile," exclaimed Roberto, recognizing the old neighbor who lived on a nearby property. "Well, look who's back," the man smiled, approaching with open arms. "Took you long enough. I thought this stubborn old guy was going to end up forgetting his owner." The two men embraced warmly, a decades-old friendship, easily rekindled, as if time were just an insignificant detail. "But how did Palomo survive the fire?" Roberto asked, approaching the horse, who was now stretching his neck over the stall divider, seeking contact. "He escaped during the chaos," Juvenal explained. "I found him on my property the next day, scared and with a few singed patches in his coat, but nothing serious. Since then, I've taken care of him, waiting for the day you'd come back." Roberto stroked Palomo's muzzle, feeling the familiar texture under his fingers. The horse had been his companion for over 15 years, a gift Sofia had insisted on giving him when he retired from the accounting firm in Santos. "You knew I'd come back?" he asked Juvenal, eyes still fixed on the animal. "Your Andre told me about the plans a few months ago. Asked for secrecy, of course. Wanted to surprise you." Roberto shook his head, still amazed at the extent of the plan orchestrated by his son. "And you helped rebuild the house. Everyone helped a little. Folks around here like you and Donna Sofia a lot. God rest her soul. When your Andre told us what he wanted to do, no one hesitated. The idea that so many people had come together to help rebuild his home, to give back a bit of what he had lost, deeply touched Roberto's heart. During his time in São Paulo, he had felt so alone, so out of place, that he had forgotten what it was like to be part of a community. "Your house looks beautiful, doesn't it?" commented Juvenal with pride evident in his voice, "just like the original. My Zulite helped pick out the curtains and the bedspreads." She said she remembered exactly what Donna Sofia liked. "Does Donna Zulite still make the cassava cake?" Roberto asked with a nostalgic smile. "She does. Better than ever. She's dying to see you. She said she's coming tomorrow to bring a fresh one to welcome you back." The mention of the cassava cake brought to Roberto's mind those Sunday afternoons after lunch, when neighbors gathered on their porch for coffee and conversations that stretched until sunset. It was a tradition Sofia loved to keep, always with a table full of homemade treats and a heart open to welcome friends. Andre appeared at the entrance of the stable, followed by Lucas, who ran ahead. "I see you found Palomo," he said, smiling as he saw his father stroking the horse. "When I found out Mr. Juvenal had saved him, I knew we had to bring him back too. Will you teach me how to ride, Grandpa?" Lucas asked, cautiously approaching the animal. "Of course, my beau," Roberto replied, surprised at how naturally the promise came from his lips. Weeks ago, he would have said he had neither the strength nor the spirit for such an activity. Now, the idea of spending hours teaching his grandson to ride seemed not only possible, but extremely desirable. "Not today, Lucas," Andre intervened, placing a hand on his son's shoulder. "Your grandfather needs to rest, and dinner will be ready soon. Tomorrow, you two start your riding lessons." "But Dad," the boy began to protest. "Your father is right, Lucas," said Roberto gently. "Tomorrow we'll have the whole day ahead of us. I promise it will be the first thing we do after breakfast." The boy's face lit up at the promise. "Promise, Grandpa's word." Roberto replied, making a solemn gesture that drew laughter from everyone. Back at the house, as he watched Andre and Mariana preparing dinner in the kitchen, with Lucas enthusiastically helping to set the table, Roberto felt a sense of fullness he hadn't experienced since before the fire. The emptiness that had consumed him for months, the feeling of being a burden, was beginning to fade, replaced by something resembling hope. After dinner, everyone gathered on the veranda to watch the sunset. The view was breathtaking, the sky painted in shades of orange, pink, and purple, reflected in the calm waters of the bay. Fishermen's boats slowly returned, their silhouettes outlined against the fiery horizon. "Just as I remembered," Roberto commented, contentedly sighing in the rocking chair. "There's no sunset like Paradise. Is that why you and Mom chose to live here?" asked Andre, sitting on the veranda floor with his back against a column. "In part," Roberto replied, eyes lost in the horizon. "Your mother fell in love with this town the first time we came here, back when we were still dating. She said there was something magical about it, something that calmed the soul. When the opportunity to buy this land came up, we didn't think twice. And yes, we built the house from scratch. Did you two design it yourselves?" "Yes, we hired a local architect, but the design was mostly Sophia's. She drew every room, picked every detail. She wanted it to be a place where we could grow old together, surrounded by beauty." The silence that followed was heavy with emotion. Sophia's presence felt almost tangible in the evening air. "You know," he continued after a moment, "when the fire destroyed everything, it wasn't just the house I lost. It felt like I lost Sophia all over again, as if the memories the walls held had vanished with them." Mariana, sitting nearby with Lucas asleep in her lap, spoke softly, "But now you have the house back, and the memories ... they never really left. They were here." She touched her chest, "and here." She pointed to her temple. Roberto nodded, acknowledging the wisdom in his daughter-in-law's words. "It's true. And you've given me something I never thought I'd have again, a home." As darkness deepened, the first stars began to dot the sky. The temperature dropped gradually, bringing a cool breeze laced with the scent of night flowers from the garden. "I think it's time to put this little guy to bed," said Mariana, adjusting Lucas in her arms. "We all need some rest. It's been an emotional day." Andre got up to help his wife with their sleeping son. "You coming, Dad?" Roberto shook his head. "I'll stay a little longer. I want to enjoy this night." Once everyone had gone inside, Roberto remained alone on the veranda, lulled by the sound of the waves and the rhythmic creaking of the rocking chair. He closed his eyes, allowing himself to fully feel each sensation: the scent of the sea, the damp air on his skin, the distant chirping of crickets, and the occasional call of a nocturnal bird. "I'm home, Sophia," he thought, with a serenity he hadn't felt in a long time. Finally, "I'm home." The next morning, Roberto woke up before dawn, just as he used to when he lived there. For a brief moment, upon opening his eyes, he felt the disorientation of someone waking in an unfamiliar place, but reality quickly caught up with him. He was home, in his room, in his bed. He got up without haste, enjoying the absence of the usual morning aches. Maybe it was the more comfortable mattress, or perhaps the atmosphere of the place itself was acting as a balm for his aging body. He dressed and went out into the garden. The sky was beginning to lighten in the east, announcing the sun's arrival. Dew covered the grass and flowers like scattered pearls, reflecting the new day's light. Roberto took a deep breath, filling his lungs with the crisp morning air. The garden was different from how he remembered it naturally. Some plants had been replaced and others added, but the spirit of the place remained, and Roberto could feel Sophia's touch in every flower bed, in every arrangement. He walked slowly across the lawn, observing how the morning light transformed everything it touched. He reached a small white fence marking the garden's main area and leaned on it, taking in the panorama ahead. From there, he could see the entire property sloping gently down to the private beach, the strip of golden sand, and beyond it, the vast sea stretching to the horizon. "Good morning, Dad." Andre's voice came from behind him. "Up early today?" Roberto turned, smiling at his son, who approached carrying two steaming mugs of coffee. "Old habits die hard," he replied, accepting one of the mugs. "I've always liked watching the sunrise from here." Andre stood beside his father, gazing at the same view. "Mom used to say that early in the morning was when you could hear the secrets the sea whispered during the night." Roberto chuckled softly, remembering Sophia's peculiar philosophies. She had those poetic ways of seeing the world. She made everything seem more magical, more meaningful. They stood in silence for a few minutes, sipping the hot coffee as the sun fully emerged on the horizon, casting a golden path across the water. "You know you didn't have to do all this, right?" Roberto said finally. "It must have cost a fortune besides all the work." Andre shook his head. "It was exactly what I needed to do, Dad. After the fire, when you came to live with us in Snow Polo, I saw how hard it was for you, as if a part of you had stayed behind. Among the ashes, I felt like a burden to you," Roberto admitted, eyes fixed on the sea. "An old man, useless, taking up space and consuming resources. You were never a burden, Dad," Andre said, his voice thick with emotion. "You're my family. Everything I am, I owe to you and Mom. You gave me a home when I had nothing. You chose me. How could I not do the same for you?" Roberto felt the sting of tears in his eyes. "When Sophia left, I thought I'd never feel whole again," he confessed. "Then came the fire, and I lost even the place where our memories lived. It felt like losing her a second time." "I know," Andre said, placing a hand on his father's shoulder. "That's why we had to bring you back home, to the place where Mom still lives in every corner." The sound of quick footsteps came from the direction of the house. It was Lucas, running toward them with all the energy of a 10-year-old, still in his pajamas. "Grandpa, you promised we'd ride horses today," he exclaimed, nearly out of breath from the sprint. Roberto laughed, feeling a surge of affection for his grandson. "And we will, my beau, but first a hearty breakfast." "You can't ride on an empty stomach. I already brushed my teeth," Lucas declared proudly. "Mom's making pancakes." Andre raised an eyebrow at his son. "And who said you can go running barefoot through the grass? You'll catch a cold." "Oh, let the boy be," Andre interjected, a mischievous sparkle in his eyes. "A little morning dew never hurt anyone, right, Lucas?" The boy nodded vigorously, complicit with his grandfather. Andre shook his head, pretending exasperation. "I can see I'll have to deal with two mischievous boys now." The three of them laughed, sharing one of those perfect moments that often go unnoticed but form the true fabric of happiness. Back at the house, they found Mariana in the kitchen, enveloped by the aroma of melted butter and cinnamon. The table was set for four, with a central platter filled with golden pancakes and small bowls containing various toppings: honey, jam, fresh fruit. "Just in time," she smiled, placing another pancake on the platter. "I thought we'd have to send out a search party for you." Breakfast took place in a festive atmosphere. Laughter echoed through the kitchen, stories were shared, and plans for the day were made. Roberto found himself, several times, simply absorbing the scene with a gratitude that barely fit in his chest. After the meal, as promised, Roberto took Lucas to the stable for the long-awaited riding lesson. Juvenal showed up shortly after, bringing a smaller saddle more suitable for the boy. "Look what I found in my storage," exclaimed the old neighbor. "I used it to teach my grandkids to ride. I thought it'd be perfect for the bow." Lucas was practically bursting with excitement as the men prepared Palomo. Surprisingly, Roberto discovered that his hands still remember every move: how to tighten the saddle, adjust the bridle, check if everything was secure. "We'll start slow," he explained to his grandson, helping him onto the horse. "First, you need to feel the animal, understand how he moves." Palomo, as if he understood the importance of his role, remained exceptionally calm as Lucas settled into the saddle, holding the reins with his small, inexperienced but determined hands. "That's it," encouraged Roberto, walking beside him. "Keep your back straight and relax your shoulders. The horse feels when you're tense." Andre watched from afar, leaning against a tree, his phone forgotten in his pocket. There was something deeply moving about seeing his father, who, just weeks earlier, had seemed to lose all will to live, now teaching his son to ride, his eyes shining with renewed purpose. The morning flew by as Lucas progressed from a cautious walk to a gentle trot around the small corral, his cheeks flushed with excitement and pride every time he successfully followed one of his grandfather's instructions. "You're a great teacher, Grandpa," exclaimed the boy when they finally dismounted for lunch. Roberto smiled, feeling a satisfaction he had forgotten was possible. "And you're a dedicated student. We'll continue tomorrow, if you'd like." "I do, every day." In the days and weeks that followed, a new routine was established. Andre and Mariano were able to work remotely for a month, allowing the whole family to stay in parity during that time. Afterward, they agreed to come every weekend and during Lucas's school holidays. Roberto visibly blossomed in this new environment. His pain seemed to ease, his posture grew more upright, and his eyes regained their sparkle. Every morning, he woke up early to tend the garden, replanting Sophia's favorite flowers, growing aromatic herbs and vegetables. Afternoons were dedicated to Lucas with riding lessons, fishing trips to the beach, or simply long conversations on the porch, where Roberto shared stories from the past that made the boy's eyes widen with fascination. "Did you and Grandma Sophia really travel the whole coast in a small boat?" Lucas asked incredulously. "A 26-foot sailboat," Roberto confirmed, smiling at the memory. "We spent 3 months sailing from port to port, from Parity to Fortaleza. It was our belated honeymoon. When your father was already in college, the local community also celebrated Roberto's return. On Sundays, as in the old days, neighbors would drop by for afternoon coffee, bringing treats and stories. Donna Zulide with her cassava cakes, Juvenal with his fisherman tales, and other new and familiar faces that made up the social fabric of that corner of the Brazilian coast. One afternoon, while Roberto was tidying up some tools in the shed behind the house, he found a box he hadn't noticed before. Inside were carpentry tools that had belonged to his father and that he thought had been lost in the fire. "Andre found these things at Juvenal's house," explained Mariana, who found him sitting on the shed floor, holding an old hand plane with tears in his eyes. "Apparently, you had lent some tools before the fire. I didn't even remember," Roberto confessed. "My father taught me how to use each one of them when I was Lucas's age." The next day, Roberto began a new project, building a small wooden boat for his grandson. He worked a few hours every day, shaping each piece with the care and precision that time and experience had granted him. At night, when everyone was asleep, Roberto would often sit on the porch, contemplating the moonlit sea. In those solitary hours, he spoke silently with Sophia, telling her about his day, about how Lucas was growing, about the small joys rediscovered. One of those nights, after flitting through a few more pages of Sophia's diary, he found a passage that deeply moved him. "Home is not just a place, Roberto. It's where our hearts find rest, where our souls recognize each other. As long as we're together, as long as we remember one another, we'll always have a home." Inspired by those words, Roberto picked up a pen and opened the diary to its last blank page. There, with the tremulous handwriting of the years, but a heart overflowing with certainty, he wrote, "Sophia, my love, I've come home. Not just to these walls that our son rebuilt with so much love, but to the home that has always existed within me, in the bonds we formed, in the lives we touched. Thank you for teaching me that love transcends time, space, and even departure. We will always be together in the sea breeze, in the scent of the garden flowers, in our grandson's eyes. I will love you forever." When Andre, Mariana, and Lucas had to return to São Paulo, Roberto surprised everyone by announcing he would stay in Parity. "Are you sure, Dad?" Andre asked, worried. "Staying here alone? I'm never truly alone here," Roberto replied calmly. "Besides, Juvenal and Donna Zulide are always nearby. And you'll be coming on the weekends, won't you?" "Every weekend," Lucas promised, clinging to his grandfather in a tight hug. "And during vacation, I'll stay a whole month." The decision proved to be the right one. In the following months, Roberto found a new sense of purpose. In addition to taking care of the house and garden, he began teaching volunteer carpentry classes to local youth, passing on skills he had learned from his own father. The small boat for Lucas was completed and christened Sophia in impromptu ceremony. It brought together family and friends on the beach in front of the house, watching his grandson sail for the first time in the calm waters of the bay, his face lit with the same passion for the sea it had always lived in Roberto's heart, was one of the happiest moments of his life. On a Sunday evening, after a weekend full of activities with his family who now returned to São Paulo, Roberto sat in his favorite rocking chair on the porch. The first stars had begun to dot the sky, and the sea took on that deep blue hue that precedes night. He closed his eyes, feeling the sea breeze caress his face. A profound sense of gratitude and fulfillment washed over him. Life had given him a second chance, a chance not just to rebuild a house, but to rebuild his own spirit, once broken by the weight of loss and guilt. "We're home, Sophia," he thought, a serene smile on his lips. Finally, truly home. The end. Dear listeners, we hope the journey of Roberto Moreira has touched your hearts. For more emotional stories like this, we've prepared a special playlist exploring the complexities of life and the bonds that unite us as family. Click to the left to access it. If this narrative stirred something in you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and like the video. Every day, we bring new and unique stories that explore the depth of human emotions and the beauty of new beginnings. Leave a comment if you've ever lived or witnessed an act of love as transformative as Andre's toward his father. We're eager to hear your stories too.